Hello, hello. Welcome back to No Me Callo. I won't stay quiet. I'm your host, Lomelin, and thank you for being here, for listening, for showing up, and for choosing not to look away. Today, we continue with episode 4 of a special series I created during the month of January in recognition of Human Trafficking Awareness Month, a month dedicated to shedding light on a reality many people would rather not see, because it's uncomfortable, because it hurts, because it forces us to confront hard truths, human trafficking. That's why this January I launched the series, Unmasking Human Trafficking in Our Community, Desenmascarando el Tráfico Humano en Nuestra Comunidad. A series where every week we speak honestly and deeply about a crime that doesn't always look like it does in the movies, but happens far closer than we think, in our communities, in our workplaces, in our neighborhoods. In previous episodes, we talked about what human trafficking is, labor trafficking, and how fear and silence are used as tools of control. So if you haven't listened to those episodes yet, I honestly encourage you to go back and listen, because each of one of those builds an essential part of this conversation. They were women, they were men, sometimes minors, sometimes adults. They were not looking for fame. They were not looking for easy money. They were not looking for attention. They were trying to survive. They trusted someone, a promise, an opportunity that seemed safe, a person who smiled, who listened, who said, "I'll take care of you. I'll help you. You'll be okay with me." But what looked like protection was control. What looked like love was manipulation. And what looked like a way out was a trap. Their days were not measured in worked hours. They were measured in exhausted bodies, sleepless nights, constant fear, in orders they were not allowed to question. There were no keys, no visible chains, no locked rooms. There was something stronger: threats, shame, dependency, and a fear so deep it paralyzed any attempt to escape. They were told, "This is just how it is. If you speak up, no one will believe you. You agreed to this. It's better if you stay quiet. If you love me, then do this for us." And little by little, everything became normalized. Abuse was disguised as an agreement. Exploitation was sold as a choice. So get ready, because today we're not talking about movie-style kidnappings. We're not talking about strangers dragging people away by force. Today we're talking about something far more dangerous: how sexual trafficking hides in relationships, in promises, in need, in silence. How it starts slowly, and by the time you realize what's happening, you no longer decide over your body, your time, or your life. Today we're talking about sex trafficking. And before we continue, I want to make something very clear. Sex trafficking is never a choice. It does not matter if there was a yes at the beginning. It does not matter if money was involved. When there is coercion, deception, threats, manipulation, or abuse of power, we are not talking about prostitution. We are talking about human trafficking. And this is not bad behavior. It's not making poor choices. It's not knowing what you signed up for. It's not, well, they must like that life. This is systemic violence. This is control. This is exploitation. So before we begin, an important content warning. This is a heavy episode, an episode that discusses sexual trafficking, abuse, coercion, and sexual violence. Throughout this episode, I will share real-life examples, explicit situations, and experiences that may be difficult to hear. I will talk about sexual acts, control over the body, exploitation, and the deep impact these violences have on survivors. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, anxious, sad, or triggered, it's okay to pause. It is okay to stop, and it is okay to come back later or not come back today at all. Listen at your own pace. Take care of your heart. Take care of your mind. Take care of your body. This episode is not meant to be consumed all at once if you're not ready. Your well-being matters more than finishing an episode. And if this topic connects to your own story, please remember you are not alone, and there are people and resources available to support you when and if you choose. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening with intention. And thank you for giving yourself permission to take the space you need. So you already know what to do. Get comfortable, grab your coffee, your cafecito, your glass of wine, or your cold beer, and get ready to chismear with me. So what is sex trafficking? When people hear sex trafficking, they imagine a very specific scene. A kidnapping, a van, a stranger, someone chained up, or people on the street offering their services. And yes, maybe that does happen sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't start that way. Sex trafficking happens when a person is forced, manipulated, or deceived into performing sexual acts in exchange for money or other benefits, and they have no real control to say no. And I want to make this very clear. Sex trafficking is never a choice. There is never true consent when there is fear, coercion, or control. And it doesn't matter if the person knew the trafficker, they agreed to something at the beginning, they received payment, they were not physically chained, they didn't ask for help immediately. If there is control, threat, manipulation, or fear, that is sex trafficking. So let's be clear. Sex trafficking is never a choice, never. If there is fear, there is no consent. If there are threats, there is no freedom. And if someone controls your money, your body, your time, or your voice, that is not work. That is not voluntary. We often hear the word prostitution and think, okay, that's work, that's a choice. But here's something very important. Prostitution, when truly voluntary, is a personal decision. The person has control. They can say no and they can leave. But sex trafficking, however, sometimes hides behind that same word just to justify exploitation, abuse, and manipulation. And this is where we fail as a society. We see someone walking down the street, going into a building, working, and we think, oh, they're living their life. But we don't see the invisible cage that keeps them trapped. And this cage has no iron bars, no locks we can touch, and it isn't full of chains that can be broken by physical force. It is made of threats disguised as care, promises that are never kept, shame that paralyzes, fear that makes you obey without question. This cage is silent, it is invisible, and it lives in the mind and the heart of the person. It tells them, if you speak up, no one will believe you. If you try to leave, you will lose everything. If you resist, there will be consequences. If you love me, do this for us. And slowly, what starts as an opportunity or as love, it becomes a cycle of control that seems impossible to escape. The person may smile, they may go out, interact with others, but inside, every decision, every thought, every move is marked by fear. And here's the truth many don't want to see. Sex trafficking doesn't always look violent from the outside. Sometimes a person is being trafficked from their own home. Sometimes the most dangerous thing is the silent, normalized abuse, the thing society teaches us to ignore. That's just life. It's not big of a deal. Every excuse we hear can become another chain in that invisible cage. And every hidden thread, every lie, every manipulation, every isolation, it is another piece of control that destroys freedom, dignity, and hope. That's why today I want you to open your eyes, to listen closely, to feel the weight of those words. Because this happens every day, closer than we think, in our cities, in our neighborhoods, even in places that seem safe. It's not easy to hear. It's not comfortable, but it's necessary. Recognizing that invisible cage is the first step to breaking it. So how does sex trafficking really start? Well, sex trafficking almost never starts with violence. It starts with attention. And that's what makes it so hard to detect. It starts when someone sees an emotional wound and decides to exploit it. When someone notices your fear, your loneliness, your need for affection, and instead of offering genuine support, they offer a path that seems safe, that seems caring, that seems protective, but is actually a trap. It starts with someone who listens when no one else does, someone who validates your feelings, your insecurities, your pain, who says, I understand you, you deserve better, I can help you. Words that feel soft, warm, but slowly and visibly they become hooks. And gradually, almost without realizing, that person becomes the center of your world. They don't just promise protection, affection, or stability. They make you feel dependent on them to survive, to be seen, to feel accepted. What began as an attention, understanding, a human gesture, transform into a psychological, emotional, and eventually physical control. And here's the scariest part. It all seems natural at first. It's easy to confuse care with manipulation, interest with control, attention with obligation. The trafficker teaches you to distrust your own instincts, to normalize warning signs, to accept the unacceptable. Because all the time you hear things like, I trust you, I just want to help you. No one understands you like I do. And every phrase that sounds supportive is another thread in the web that traps you. Every seemingly genuine smile is another invisible lock on your cage. Every promise of a future is a rope tightening around your freedom. Sex trafficking is not just a physical act. It doesn't start with explicit violence. It starts in the mind. It starts in the heart. It seeps into hope. It feeds onto the most basic human desire to be seen, to be loved, to be heard. When that attention becomes control, that promise becomes threat. By then you are trapped, isolated, unsure who to trust, where to turn, or how to escape. And it slowly breaks you, day by day, until your freedom, your dignity, and your voice feel unrecognizable. So I will be sharing 2 different stories of survivors, so let's start with number 1. She was 19 years old. She had left a place where love always hurt, where abandonment was normal, where no one had ever taught her what healthy care looked like. Trusting someone was a luxury she never had. And then he appeared, right when she felt lonelier than ever. He didn't arrive with shouts, with physical threats, or with violence. He arrived with attention, interest, apparent care, with flowers, with messages every day, with promises that he would take care of her, that no one else could do it like he could. Soft words, small gestures, but charged with a power that slowly trapped her. And at first, he paid for everything: food, transportation, gifts. Everything seemed like a generosity. But then he began to say that he needed her to do something for him, and that because she loved them, she would have to comply. Just go on this one date with a friend, he said. You'll get $100. You don't have to do anything else, just this once. It's to get ahead. And at first, she didn't want to, but eventually she accepted. And that was how it all began. One date, then the next, until eventually he forced her to have sex with different people. That just once became a routine. Week after week, month after month, each just this once was another invisible chain. With each chain, he taught her that she couldn't trust herself, that she needed him, that her world without him would be empty. When she hesitated, he cried. When she said no, he got angry. When she tried to leave, he threatened her. Words disguised as love, care, fear. Words that said, without me, you're nothing. If you speak, no one will believe you. You agreed to this. She accepted out of fear, not freedom. She accepted because every decision was a calculation between what she wanted and what she feared. When fear rules, there is no real consent. There were no locks, no chains, but there was terror, isolation, absolute control. And every move had to pass his approval. Every conversation, every call, every relationship was watched and judged. Her world shrank to the shadow of her trafficker, and every attempt to reclaim autonomy was blocked, manipulated, or punished. He controlled not just her time and money, but her emotions, her perception of normal, even her identity. Every act of independence became guilt, and every desire for freedom became fear. Freedom seemed possible, but in reality, she was trapped in an invisible cage no one else could see. That is sex trafficking. It does not need physical violence at first. It doesn't need bars or chains. Sex trafficking begins with manipulation, with promises, with attention disguised as affection. It seeps into the areas where someone may be vulnerable, into the need for love, into hope of being seen, heard, and cared for. And before you know it, your world is no longer yours. Your body is no longer yours. Your voice is no longer yours. This type of exploitation slowly breaks the mind, the heart, and the life itself. While outside, everything seems normal. No one sees the cage. No one sees how someone who seemed like a savior becomes an invisible jailer. And while this is happening, the victim often doesn't even know how to name what's happening. They normalize it. They justify it. They believe that it's their fault, that they deserve it, that this is how relationships or life itself works. But no, accepting under fear is not acceptance. Resisting under coercion is not weakness. Living under control is not a choice. This is sex trafficking, closer than we think, quieter than we want to imagine, more devastating than words can even describe. So now let's go to story number 2. And I want you to listen very closely because many people don't believe this happens, that men can also be victims of sex trafficking. He was 35 years old, an adult, a hard worker, responsible. He met someone who offered him opportunities, work, quick money, a place to stay. Everything seemed legitimate. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed necessary. At first, it was just work, long hours, yes, but paid. Promises of stability. Everything seemed like a chance to get ahead, to improve his life. But then came the favors, small things that didn't hurt, tasks to earn trust, and then came the sexual demands. Every favor became controlled, every act became a test, and every word a judgment. He was told he had to satisfy them sexually to keep his job or his roof over his head, and if he didn't, no one would believe him if he spoke out. Fear kept him silent. Shame kept him trapped. The illusion that he could move forward if he endured a little longer made him stay, even when he knew something was wrong. And every attempt to resist, every thought of escape, was blocked by veiled threats, reminders of places that he was vulnerable, and the belief that no one else could protect him. And sex trafficking also lives in the stigma that says men aren't victims, and the mockery of those who think men should always be able to handle everything, and the silence imposed by society that rarely recognizes male exploitation, and the internal pressure to maintain an image of strength and control while freedom and dignity slowly slip away. There were no chains, no locks, no immediate beatings, but there was an invisible cage built of fear, shame, and manipulation. His body became a space of obligation and terror. His trust was broken. His sense of normality was distorted. And this is sex trafficking. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It doesn't matter if you're young or adult. It doesn't matter if it seems impossible or no one would believe it. Sex trafficking hides behind manipulation, psychological power, empty promises, and false opportunities. It feeds on fear and isolation, and it grows stronger with the shame and silence of those who suffer and those who ignore it. It's important that you understand this. Sexual abuse doesn't need physical violence to be real. You don't need to see beatings to recognize the harm. You don't need a change to see the person. When someone controls your money, your time, your body, or your voice, and keeps you in fear and guilt, that is exploitation. That is sex trafficking, and it happens closer than we think. And there are signs we see every day, signs many prefer to ignore because looking directly at the truth hurts. People who cannot leave when they want, who seem to stay by choice but are actually trapped in an invisible chains made of fear, manipulation, and obligation, who smile and go through their daily routine, but every step is guided by silent threats, subtle reminders that if they resist, they will lose everything they have or love. People who live in constant fear, not the fear of passing situation, but a fear that becomes their shadow, that follows them wherever they go, that makes them measure every word, every gesture, every interaction. This fear steals peace, freedom, and the sense of ownership over their own body and choices. And it is not always visible, but you can see it in their eyes, in their posture, in the way they accept what others impose. People who seem to function, who work, who care for family, who live life while broken inside. They look productive, responsible, normal. No one suspects that behind that facade lies invisible torment. Every smile may hide an internal struggle, and every achievement feels empty because of their being has been coerced, manipulated, and exploited. Living like this is not just hard, it is heartbreaking. And sex trafficking feeds on our indifference. It grows when we walk past someone who looks fine, when we assume men can handle everything, when we dismiss stories that don't match our idea of a victim, and it thrives on silence, stigma, judgment, and ignorance. Every time we don't see, we don't listen, and don't believe, we give more power to the exploitation and to those who manipulate and control. Because sexual exploitation doesn't always look like chains, beatings, or shouts. Sometimes it hides in a job contract, in promises of quick money, in favors that don't hurt. And the illusion of this is how you survive. And while the world ignores these signs, the people trapped inside feel there's no way out. That no one will understand their pain, that no one will help them, that no one will see them. So pay attention, watch, listen. There are signs every day. People who cannot leave when they want, people living in constant fear, people who seem to function but are broken inside. And remember, ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. Sex trafficking thrives on our indifference. And as always, I want to share relevant information in these episodes. And today, I want to talk about something that always gives me hope. Even though these realities are harsh, there are always ways to act, to change failing systems, and to listen to survivors. The U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking is made up of survivors of human trafficking, sexual, and labor, not theories, not cold statistics, real lives. People who have lived exploitation, who know from the inside how it works, how it feels, and what truly helps people move forward. Each year, the Council publishes a report with clear recommendations for changing failing systems. The 2025 report emphasizes something crucial. Solutions doesn't work without listening to survivors. Nothing about us without us. And it's a reminder that policies, programs, and protocols must be built with the experience of those who have survived exploitation, because no one knows the reality better than they do. And these reports and resources are essential. They show us which warning signs we ignore, which systems are broken, and how to intervene effectively. They remind us that prevention, protection, and support are not abstract ideas. They are concrete actions that can change lives if designed with real experience and understanding. Recognizing the signs, reporting suspicious activity, and using available resources can make a difference. People who seem to function while broken inside deserve our attention, respect, and action. And every report, every recommendation, every survivor story guides us toward a more just and humane system. If we open our eyes, listen, and believe, we can change the narrative. We can turn indifference into action, shame into support, and silence into voice. There are signs every day. People who cannot leave when they want, people who live in constant fear, people who seem to function but are broken inside. And the more we see and respond, the more we can help. Sex trafficking feeds on our indifference, but it can also end with our awareness, commitment, and action. So I encourage you to read the Council's annual reports. Learn from survivors. They are the true experts. Finally, leaving trafficking is not a heroic moment. It is not a movie scene where the victim breaks chains and runs to freedom while there is a victory music playing in the background. There is no perfect instant of victory. Leaving trafficking is a long, painful process full of ups and downs, and every step is an enormous effort because the harm is not only physical, it's in the mind, in the heart, and the trust in oneself. Sometimes it means going back to places that scare them, back to people who manipulated and controlled them, back to memories that hurt, and not because they want to, but because systems fail, because protection isn't always available, because total safety isn't immediate. Each return is a test of resilience, an internal struggle between fear and the need to move forward, between guilt and hope for reconstruction. Sometimes it involves fear that no one will believe their story, fear of ridicule, fear of the violence that could occur if they speak, fear of losing all they've rebuilt. Fear that feels like a constant weight, a reminder that freedom isn't always safe, that trust must be earned slowly, and that every decision requires courage that doesn't always feel enough. And sometimes it means starting from scratch. Recovering the body, mind, and dignity can take months, even years. Rebuilding work, family, and social life after sexual exploitation is full of obstacles, and every day can feel like a small step. Learning to trust again, to say no, to choose what they want for themselves. This is all part of the process the world rarely sees or recognizes. And yet, many people do succeed. People who could have been invisible, who could have stayed trapped forever in fear and shame, find strength in their story. They find community in those who support them. They find courage in their own resilience. Every survivor who rebuilds their life is a light breaking the silence, proof that even through sex trafficking, hope can heal. Leaving trafficking is painful, but it is also human, and is not heroic in the spectacular scene. It is heroic in the everyday, in the quiet, in every decision to keep moving forward despite fear. It's heroic in saying, "Here I am, and I deserve freedom," even when society ignored the signs to show they needed help. Because the signs are there every day. People who cannot leave when they want. People who live in constant fear. People who seem to function but are broken inside. Sex trafficking feeds on our indifference, disbelief, and silence, but it can also be stopped with our attention, our listening, and our action. The more we open our eyes, the more we believe and support, the more voice we give to survivors. The more this process can be about hope and not just survival. Leaving trafficking is not heroic in a flashy way. It is long, sometimes dark, full of fear and setbacks, but it is also a journey where resilience, help, and hope build a new life beyond pain, beyond silence, and beyond fear. In the episode description, you will find a link to the Amazon with the full list of mentioned in No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet, and you will also find the link to the resource I shared today with reports from the U.S. Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. And don't forget, Every Friday, we have a new episode that awaits for you. The next episode of our series is called Community Action, How We Can All Make a Difference. Acción comunitaria, Cómo Todos Podemos Hacer la Diferencia. In our final episode, we'll talk about something often forgotten. Fighting human trafficking isn't just for specialists, police, or big organization. It's for all of us. Every person in the community has a role that can make a difference, and every action, no matter how small, can help someone. And I want to be honest with you, I'm not perfect. I'm not the absolute expert on this topic, but I am someone who cares deeply, who has seen human trafficking injustices up close, and who has learned, sometimes through my own mistakes, how to truly support survivors without re-traumatizing them. This episode will be a space for learning, reflection, and action. We'll talk about the concrete things communities can do, like recognizing warning signs without judging, assuming, but with sensitivity and care, how to offer real support to survivors by listening, believing, and respecting their pace, how to work together as neighbors, friends, family, to create safe spaces and prevent human trafficking. We'll also talk about how professionals and activists can improve, avoiding common mistakes that can re-traumatize survivors, how to accompany survivors in a way that feels safe, respectful, and empowering. This episode is a call to action. Human trafficking doesn't end while we remain indifferent. But when we open our eyes and act with awareness and respect, we become part of the solution. Every survivor story teaches us about resilience, community strength, and the power of empathy. So I invite you to come ready to be the change, to act from heart, honestly sharing lessons, mistakes, and hope. Together we can make a difference. If you ever wondered what can you do, this episode will give you tools, inspiration, and a clear reminder community action matters. So don't miss it, and please keep helping me by sharing these episodes to raise awareness about this cruel crime, human trafficking. You were listening to No Me Callo, I Won't Stay Quiet. I'm your host, Jessica Lomelin. Until next time.